Let's imagine a world where the stories we hold sacred are not just simple truths, but powerful myths that resonate deep within us. Archetypes that shape our identity, morality, and collective consciousness. Consider the story of Jesus' birth, a miraculous event that has inspired millions. But ask, could it also be a universal human myth, shared across cultures, rooted in ancient symbols, and shaped over centuries by social and religious institutions?
What if the deepest stories we tell ourselves focused less on literal history and more on the archetypal truths that unite us? And what dangers lurk in believing in stories, whether divine prophecies or apocalyptic predictions, as inevitable future realities? Today we explore the fascinating and sometimes unsettling power of myth, belief, and prophecy, and how understanding their origins could change how we see ourselves, our world, and our future. The story of Jesus' birth stands as one of the most influential narratives in human history, shaping religious doctrines, moral values, and cultural identities worldwide.
Traditionally, this story is understood as a miraculous divine event, conceived by the Holy Spirit without human intervention, embodying divinity in human form. However, to critically and reflectively understand this profound narrative, it is essential to question its origins. Could it not also be a product of human cultural narrative, mythical symbolism, and social norms? Throughout history, stories of miraculous or divine births have appeared in almost every culture, testimony to the universal human desire to find meaning in origins, authority, and divine connection. These stories serve as archetypes, embodying ideals of heroism, divine authority, and cosmic order. Recognizing this cross-cultural phenomenon invites us to consider that the biblical account of Jesus' birth might share traits with mythical motifs rather than literal historical facts. Furthermore, human societies tend, especially within organized religions, to turn myth into doctrine. Many religious traditions reframe mythological stories and parables as literal historical events through institutional power, reinforcing dogmas and shaping beliefs that profoundly influence their followers' perceptions of reality. While these narratives can inspire devotion and moral strength, they also pose risks, especially when myths are treated as irrefutable facts, which limits critical inquiry and fosters dogmatism.
Equally important is recognizing that apocalyptic prophecies and predictions, stories of divine judgment and the end of times, are also powerful myths. When believed as unavoidable truths, they can influence behavior and social trends in destructive ways. Rather than fostering panic or fatalism, a more sensible approach is to focus on how to prevent negative outcomes through ethical action and social resilience. In this video, we explore these topics: the likely human and cultural origins of the stories of Jesus' birth, their mythical parallels across civilizations, the role of organized religion in shaping and reframing such stories, and the importance of cautious engagement with prophecy. The goal is not to weaken faith, but to foster a nuanced understanding that enriches spiritual awareness and encourages responsible and compassionate action.
The cultural and historical context of first-century Judea. To understand the biblical narratives of Jesus' birth, we must first consider the social, cultural, and biological realities of first-century Judea. Ancient Judea was a society where early marriage and teenage pregnancy were common, rooted in biological viability and social norms. Girls typically reached puberty in early adolescence, and marriage usually took place soon afterward. Marriage contracts, called ketubas, were formalized early, and betrothals sometimes lasted months or years before consummation. Pregnancy outside of marriage was heavily stigmatized. However, biological realities meant that young women could, and did, conceive naturally at this age. Historical evidence from inscriptions, archaeological finds, and biblical texts reveals that fertility and reproductive success were critical to social stability. Birth stories, whether understood as literal or symbolic, may have originated in this environment, where biological plausibility and social expectations intertwined. Over the centuries, these narratives may have been elaborated or mythologized for spiritual, political, or cultural purposes, elevating everyday events to representations of divine approval and cosmic purpose.
Myth, culture, and the power of stories. Across thousands of years and cultures, stories of miraculous or extraordinary births serve powerful symbolic functions. They often reinforce social hierarchies, legitimize rulers, or embody archetypal ideals. For example, Hinduism recounts the divine birth of Lord Krishna, born to Devaki and Vasudeva, with legends that emphasize divine intervention and cosmic destiny. Greek mythology celebrates the birth of Hercules, born to Zeus and Alcmene, as a symbol of divine legitimacy and heroic virtue. Egyptian mythology venerates Horus, who was born under extraordinary circumstances, representing royalty and divine right. Buddhist tradition describes Queen Maya dreaming of a white elephant before giving birth to Siddhartha Gautama, symbolizing auspiciousness and spiritual potential. These stories share significant motifs: virginity or miraculous conception, divine intervention, and special purpose. They act as cultural symbols, elevating their figures beyond those of ordinary humans and incorporating divine authority into the social consciousness. The narrative surrounding the birth of Jesus can be perceived in a similar way, a mythic motif expressing divine authority, fulfillment of prophecy, or cosmic significance. These stories serve as archetypal expressions of the human aspiration for connection with the divine and are recurrent across civilizations, indicating shared human themes rather than unique divine acts.
Biological and anthropological perspectives. From a biological perspective, conception at an early age, particularly during early adolescence, is entirely plausible and common in many ancient societies. Historical and anthropological evidence shows that precocious puberty and subsequent pregnancy were routine in various cultures around the world. For example, in many ancient civilizations, girls typically married and had children shortly after reaching puberty, which could have been as early as 12 or 13 years old. Given biological realities, the possibility that Mary, assuming a typical age in her cultural context, conceived naturally within social norms, is highly plausible. Narratives of miraculous conceptions, whether divine or mythical, may reflect or have been inspired by real biological phenomena that have been exaggerated and mythologized over generations. These stories then serve as symbolic representations of divine favor or cosmic purpose rather than literal medical accounts. This does not mean discarding faith, but rather recognizing that the interrelation of biological facts with mythical narrative is a universal feature of human cultures, highlighting that supernatural narratives often function as cultural symbols, articulating intangible truths through compelling stories. The role of myth and parable in religious and cultural traditions. Throughout history, organized religions have used mythical stories, often originating in ancient pre-literate societies, as fundamental elements of faith. These myths, rich in symbolic content, are often recast over the centuries as literal events, especially when reinforced by institutional authority, churches, clergy, and doctrinal dogma.
The transformation process involves reframing allegories and parables as historical facts to reinforce doctrinal authority, incorporating mythological motifs, virgin births, divine interventions into official narratives that serve to legitimize leaders or establish sacred legitimacy. Using these stories to unite followers under shared myths that often transcend literal truth and embody universal themes of hope, divine justice, and moral virtue. Historical examples abound. The virgin birth of Krishna, born from a divine artifact, was later incorporated into religious doctrines. The birth of Horus, associated with divine kingship, reinforced monarchical legitimacy throughout Egypt. The Greek hero Hercules, born of divine descent, exemplified social ideals. In Christianity, the story of Jesus' divine birth shares these motifs: virginity, divine intervention, acting as archetypes that resonate across different cultures and religions. The veracity of these stories often becomes a matter of faith, reinforced through dogmatic structures, rituals, and community traditions. The role of organized religion, myth, reframing, and dogmatic incorporation. One of the profound characteristics of organized religion is its ability to reframe mythological stories into doctrinal truths, thus integrating them into official theology.
This process involves interpreting symbolic stories as literal historical events to reinforce orthodoxy, incorporating mythical motifs, virgin births, divine missions, into dogmas that followers are encouraged or required to accept, employing rituals and teachings that reinforce these narratives as irrefutable facts, further consolidating their influence. While this strengthens community identity and faith, it can also foster dogmatism, inhibiting critical inquiry and encouraging literal interpretations that can obscure the story's symbolic or cultural origins. These practices can contribute to a disconnect between spiritual symbolism and literal history, sometimes leading to intolerance or dogmatic rigidity. Implication for the story of Jesus' birth. The biblical account of Jesus' divine conception, with its mythical motifs, virginity, divine intervention, has been formalized over the centuries into a fundamental dogma of Christian orthodoxy. This transformation, while enhancing theological cohesion and authority, also runs the risk of reducing history to unquestionable fact, which could limit open inquiry or contextual understanding. The power of prophecy and apocalyptic myths. In parallel, prophetic stories, those that predict divine judgments, the end of the world, or apocalyptic catastrophes, are powerful mythical archetypes in various cultures. When considered absolute or inevitable, they can profoundly influence individual and collective behavior, provoking panic, fear, or fatalism, justifying social or political control, distracting from tangible efforts to improve the world.
Historically, belief in apocalyptic prophecies has sometimes led to destructive results: mass suicides, social unrest, or violent purges. These myths, when considered certainties, can provoke self-fulfilling destructive prophecies. The wisest course advocates focusing on how to avoid such disasters. By emphasizing ethical action, social resilience, and critical thinking, we can channel mythic energies toward constructive ends, shaping the future rather than fearing an inevitable apocalyptic fate. The cautionary message: belief and its consequences. A crucial insight from this exploration is that belief itself is a powerful force. When individuals or societies accept prophecies, myths, or dogmas as irrefutable truths, they often attract or manifest those very results. The power of belief and the danger of prophecy. Belief, the conviction that a story or prophecy is true, can have profound, sometimes unforeseen, consequences. When societies or individuals accept apocalyptic prophecies or dogmatic narratives as inevitable truths, they run the risk of cultivating a mindset that inadvertently brings about the very outcomes they fear.
For example, catastrophic predictions about the end of the world have historically inspired panic, social unrest, or even acts of violence, precisely because people's fears and expectations shape their behavior. The phenomenon of self-fulfilling prophecy illustrates how focusing on apocalyptic inevitability can lead to actions that cause collapse or chaos, rather than fostering resilience, wisdom, and cooperation. This is a crucial warning. Instead of obsessing over predictions of catastrophe, we should focus on what can be done to prevent negative outcomes, building societies based on compassion, understanding, and ethical action. Prophecies, when believed as immutable facts, become tools of fatalism and passivity, diverting us from active action and responsible stewardship of our world. In this sense, our focus should be on how to generate hope and practical solutions, rather than obsessing over inevitable doom. This shift in perspective allows us to see myths and prophecies as symbols, powerful stories that inspire us to positive action rather than predictions that incite helplessness or despair.
Myth, faith, and human responsibility, stories of divine and miraculous births, whether in Christianity, Hinduism, Greek mythology, or Egyptian legends, reflect a universal human longing, the desire to see divine meaning in our origins and purpose. These narratives serve as archetypes, shaping our cultural identities, moral aspirations, and collective consciousness. However, a critical awareness is necessary. Organized religions have historically reframed mythological tales into literal truths, integrating them into doctrines and dogmas that guide faith, but can also limit inquiry. Recognizing the mythical roots of these stories enriches our understanding and allows us to appreciate their symbolic power without falling into dogmatic rigidity. Furthermore, the power of prophecy underscores the importance of discerning and responsibly addressing stories of divine judgment or the end of time. When we believe certain outcomes are inevitable, we risk attracting their content, manifesting fear and chaos instead of hope and resilience. Therefore, the way forward involves embracing stories as meaningful symbols, tools of inspiration and moral guidance, while maintaining a critical perspective that avoids literalism and fatalism. We must focus on how to act ethically, compassionately, and practically to forge a better future, rejecting the idea that our destiny is predetermined by myth or prophecy.
Conclusion. At its core, our shared human challenge is to distinguish myth from reality, symbolism from dogma, and in doing so, cultivate a worldview that empowers us to create positive change, grounded in understanding, compassion, and responsible action. Only then can we honor the profound spiritual truths hidden in these stories without being enslaved by their potential to deceive or divide. As we navigate a world filled with stories of miracles and visions of destiny, remember this: belief is not just about what we accept, but what we attract. When we cling too tightly to certainties, especially apocalyptic prophecies, we risk turning our fears into reality, rather than forging hope through action. True power lies in recognizing that stories, whether of divine birth or the end of the world, are reflections of our collective humanity. They can inspire us, teach us, or enthrall us. So the question remains: are we forging our destiny or simply obeying the mythical scripts passed down from generation to generation? Choose to see stories as symbols, tools to awaken wisdom, compassion, and responsibility. For ultimately, our most sacred duty is to create a world built not on fear or dogma, but on love, understanding, and conscious action. The choice is ours. Which story will we choose to live?
If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you don't miss out on future ideas that challenge us to think outside the box. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, and don't forget to always maintain that curiosity that drives progress. Also, explore even more fascinating content on our channel. From life-changing tips and cutting-edge technology, to the mysteries of spirituality, travel to various countries, delicious recipes, health hacks, and language learning, there's something here to spark your curiosity and elevate your life. Dive in and discover a world of knowledge awaits us.